Oh, not this one. This one. Okay. So you can see this বেশি বড় হয়ে গেছে, দেখা যাচ্ছে না তো। Now you can see it. Okay. This is these three pictures, as we have discussed, these are the overall arrangement of the head and neck. And I've told you, if we make a very simplified view or simplified idea of the arrangement of the head and neck structures, we can tell that it has got an anterior visceral compartment which contains the trachea and the esophagus, and there are lateral or vascular compartment along with the nerves, which contains the major vessels of this region, and finally the posterior vertebral compartment, where the vertebra itself is there, the spinal cord, and along with that the muscles surrounding the vertebral column is there. So this is very simplified one. If we have gone a bit more complicated one, showing the structures almost similar, but here the muscles are added. But it is not enough, because in professional exam, sometimes the question comes, draw and label the section of head and neck at the level of the spine of the cervical seventh vertebra. If you draw this one, it will do, but you will not get the full mark. Just you will get the 60 to 60% marks you will be achieving. But if you can draw this one, it is a very nice one, where you can get the full marks. And it's not that difficult to draw, because you don't have to draw both the sides, and you don't have to draw these in details. Just outline. You need not to shade these things, you need not to color these things. Just outline the things and it will be enough. So what do we get here in this section? If we start from the superficial most structure, this is the skin. As you know, everywhere this is the most superficial structure. Then is the superficial fascia, and the specialty of these superficial fascia on the head and neck is that it has got a muscle that I have told you in details in the last class, is the platysma muscle, right? So this one is a huge muscle called platysma, which is a superficial muscle within the superficial fascia, and deep to these all the subcutaneous structures lie. Actually, you know it from the last class and you have already studied it. Then comes the deep fascia, and I of this neck region, and I told you that it has got three layers: investing layer. What are the other two layers?
Prevertebral and
Pretracheal and prevertebral. We have discussed about the investing layer, that it actually is a rule of two. That means it encloses two muscles, two glands, covers the floor of the two air angles, and makes two slings. That is why it's called rule of two, I've told you. But let us now concentrate on the arrangement of the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia from the front. So this is the front side and this is the back side, or anterior posterior side. And these investing layer, as I've told you, it has split to enclose a huge muscle called sternocleidomastoid in front, and then it unites again, and you see that the external jugular vein lies in between the two layers behind the sternocleidomastoid, at the posteriormost point of the external. This is the location of the external jugular vein, whereas the anterior jugular vein lies in the same layers of the investing layer in front of the anterior margin of the sternocleidomastoid attachment, anterior attachment of the sternocleidomastoid. This is the anterior jugular vein, and these two are joined together in between through the jugular venous arch in front. And now you can see these have united again and then split again to cover another huge muscle. That is the trapezius. You know it. And then finally it has got attachment to the ligamentum nuclei. So this is the investing layer, and it has got a vertical disposition, vertical disposition I've told you in the last class. But in this section, we can also see some muscles, huge number of muscles, and we must understand the arrangement of these muscles. I told you there is an important bone other than the 7 cervical vertebrae in the neck, that is the hyoid bone, I told you. And the muscles above it are called suprahyoid bone muscles, and below it are called infrahyoid muscles. You know these terms. And one of these infrahyoid muscles are the sternohyoid muscle and sternothyroid muscle. These are flat muscles, flat muscles, and truly they are just lying deep to this investing layer. And then just this is the cervical sheath, and you know this is a derivative of the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. And this carotid sheath, in front of the carotid sheath, in front and laterally, is another muscle. This is called omohyoid muscle. Just let us have an idea. So we have discussed about so far sternocleidomastoid, trapezius, sternothyroid, and sternohyoid muscle, and the omohyoid muscle. So these are the muscles so far we have seen. Now there's this one is called prevertebral muscle, and this is represented in the neck region by the longus colli muscle. This is a prevertebral because it is lying in front of the vertebra, so this is called prevertebral muscle. Now let us concentrate on these muscles. Some of these muscles, like these trapezius and these levator scapulae, are actually related to the scapula and the trapezius, but the deep muscles of the back of the neck region, or sink to the back, are 4 groups of muscle. 4 groups of muscles are there. Let us start one by one. The first group and the most superficial group on the back of the neck are the scalenus. 3 scalenus: scalenus anterior, scalenus medius, scalenus posterior. They lie lateral to the transverse process of the cervical vertebrae. So scalenus anterior, scalenus medius, and scalenus posterior. Next group is this one. This group of muscle is known as the splenius cervicis and splenius capitis. This group lies deep to the levator scapulae and trapezius, but actually these are the deep group of muscles, not these two of the neck. This is levator scapulae and this is trapezius, though they seem also to be the deep group of muscles on the back, but actually these are the deep group of muscles. This is the scalenus group, this is the splenius group, then this is the actually erector spine group of muscles, and these are the semispinalis group, semispinalis capitis and cervicis, as finally the multifidus. So we will not consider these two as the deep group of muscles of the back. So again, what are we going to tell that the first group of muscle on the back is the splenius group, is the most. Yes, please. No, class. Why? Splenius. Sorry.
Scalenus later.
হ্যাঁ দাঁড়াও একটু দাঁড়াও, আমার একটু ক্লাসের মধ্যে ইন্টারাপশন হয়ে গেছে, তো জাস্ট এক সেকেন্ড একটু দাঁড়াও। তাহলে the splenius group is the most superficial, the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis, and the scalenus group lies lateral to the transverse process, and these 3 are actually representing the erector spine. Erector spine, you know, this is a huge muscle starting from the cervical region up to the back in the thoracic region and in the lumbar region, but they take the different names in the different regions. In the cervical region, they are called iliocostalis cervicis, longissimus capitis, and longissimus cervicis, these three. And then comes the semispinalis cervicis group and semispinalis capitis group. And lastly, and most deep is the multifidus group. So these are the four groups of muscles here, and altogether they are forming the back muscles, deep muscles of the back. Right? Is it clear? So if you want to draw, and if you need to draw these figure if you want to get the full marks in that exam, because that is a draw and label. So full marks is for drawing and labeling, not for any sort of description. You don't need to write. Whenever you get to the questions like draw and label, you just draw and label. Don't need to explain or give elaboration of anything, right? So these are the arrangement of the muscles. And now you come to the point, and let us see other structures in this section, because we are dealing with the overall arrangement of the head and neck. So you can see this is a huge gland, and you know that this is the thyroid gland, right? This is the thyroid gland, and behind the thyroid gland is the trachea. And you know, trachea is a tube which has got posterior surface is not complete, incomplete C-shaped cartilages are there, and that C-shaped cartilages are filled by trachealis muscle here. This is the trachealis muscle which completes the wall of the trachea, but it is the cartilages are itself incomplete. So why it is incomplete? So that it can accommodate the expansion of the esophagus just behind it, because you know when the food is swallowed, it goes in ab-oral direction. Ab-oral means starting from mouth, away from the mouth toward the anus. This is called ab-oral direction. And there is a peristaltic movement. So part of the esophagus enlarges and the part below it distends. In this way, the food bolus goes downwards and only in one direction. So when this esophagus is expanded, if there were no space available in front, it would have been pressed the trachea, and we would have respiratory distress during swallowing and eating. That's why there is a process that this posterior wall of the trachea is incomplete, and this is, instead of the cartilage, it is filled up by muscle so that it can accommodate the expansion of the esophagus immediately behind it. And in between these two important structures is yet another important nerve. You can see recurrent laryngeal nerves on each side. Though the distribution of the recurrent laryngeal nerves is different on both the sides, but it is very important to note that we can inadvertently damage the recurrent laryngeal nerve during the surgical procedures of the trachea or larynx above. So we must be careful not to damage this nerve, because it is in between these two and it's very easy to damage this nerve. Again, let us concentrate on other nerves and other structures here in this region. I've told you already this carotid sheath is a derivative of the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia, which contains the common carotid artery, internal carotid artery, internal jugular vein, and the vagus nerve in one sheath. So it is very important, because major blood vessels of this region and a very important cranial nerve is there. You know, vagus nerve carries most of the parasympathetics, almost 90% of the parasympathetic distribution of the parasympathetic system only through this nerve. So if the vagus nerve is damaged, you can understand what catastrophic event may occur if this nerve is damaged. So this is very important one, and it is ensheathed within the carotid sheath along with other two important structures, the common carotid artery and the internal jugular vein. And also a branch of this common carotid, internal carotid artery, is also present in this carotid sheath. Now we can see another very important nerve, though it's not a nerve actually, this is sympathetic trunk. I will be telling you about in details about this sympathetic trunk, and you see just the location of this sympathetic trunk in front of the prevertebral fascia and behind the carotid sheath's medial aspect, just behind the common carotid artery is the sympathetic trunk. It's not itself a nerve, definitely it's not itself a nerve, but very important to understand this structure and its location. Now within here another important nerve is there, is the phrenic nerve. So you can see that three important structures, nervous structures, are present very close to each other and their arrangements. Next what I am to stress is this one. What is this? Have Tanvir started the cervical vertebrae?
No, sir.
Yeah, you will be studying. You will be telling you that there is a unique feature in the transverse process of the cervical vertebrae. That is, you know, this foramen transversarium, right? Foramen transversarium. In no other regions of the body, the transverse process has got such an important, unique feature. There is a hole or foramen in the transverse process that is called foramen transversarium, and through which the vertebral arteries arise or ascend to meet to form the basilar artery, then to supply the brain and nearby structures. So this is the vertebral artery. You can see here the reddish one, here it is black, so you can't understand. Same thing here, this is the vertebral artery within a foramen. And this transverse process of the cervical vertebrae has got this unique feature that there is a foramen to accommodate or to allow the way out upwards movement course of the vertebral artery. Right, so this is the vertebral artery with the and now you can see another structure here, though it's looking so small, but it's very important, the accessory nerve, 11th cranial nerve. You know, vagus is the 10th and accessory nerve is the 11th cranial nerve. So its location you can see here. So altogether, these are the very important arrangement of all the structures in the head and neck. But we have missed, so far we have not discussed about this very important structure as well. What is this? You know?
Spinal cord.
Spinal cord.
Spinal cord. Where is it located?
Vertebral foramen.
Vertebral foramen.
Right.
Foramen, sir. Foramen vertebra.
Foramen of the vertebra forming the vertebral canal, joining to form the vertebral canal. Because, you know, when it is a spinal cord, it can't remain within one segment of the vertebra, that is vertebral foramen. It has to be located within the vertebral canal. Because it's a long thing, no? So it has to be within the vertebral canal formed by the vertebral joining of the vertebral foramens. And so what is this region of the vertebra called? This region of the vertebra is called what?
Spinal ganglion.
This is the spinal ganglion, right? And then this one?
Raman.
No.
Pedicle.
What is this one? And so, okay, let us come from inside. So, there the dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia maters here, which are covering the vertebrae spinal cord from outwards to inwards. Dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater, right? Now, what is this? The anterior horn of the spinal cord, and this is the posterior horn of the spinal cord. And this is the anterior root of the spinal nerve, and this is the posterior root of the spinal nerve, which can be identified or marked by the presence of this, you have rightly mentioned, the spinal ganglion. That is the dorsal root ganglion. Very rightly you have said. So this dorsal root ganglion indicates this is the posterior root of the spinal nerve, and this one is the anterior root. And these two roots have joined to form the
Spinal nerve.
no.
Sir, trunk.
Right. You must tell it in specific answers. This is the trunk of the spinal nerve, right? The trunk of the spinal nerve, which is formed in the intervertebral foramen, right? So how this intervertebral foramen is formed? You know it. You have studied it in details in the thorax, in everywhere. Intervertebral foramen is the space between the arch of the superior articular notch and of the vertebra below and inferior articular notch of the vertebra above forms the intervertebral foramen, where actually the trunk of the spinal nerves are formed. And immediately after the formation of the trunk of the spinal nerve, it divides into, as you have said, the ventricles and dorsal supplies the back muscles and skin, and the ventral ramus supplies the front muscles and the skin. So what kind of nerve is this ventral ramus? Is it mixed? Sensory or motor?
Sir, mixed.
Motor.
Mixed,
Mixed.
sir.
Mixed, sir. It is sensory plus motor দুটোই আছে।
Very good. Why? Because these motor root and these sensory roots are mixed together in the trunk. So the trunk, when the trunk divides, it is actually carrying the mixed type of fibers, right? So it's neither no more sensory or motor. Though it is a common apprehension that these sensory motor fibers will go into the ramus and the sensory fibers will go into the dorsal ramus. No, it has already been mixed up here, and the mixed fibers has gone both to the ventral and dorsal rami. That means both the ventral and dorsal rami are mixed, as is the trunk. It must be clear, right? So now how these things are related to how the spinal, as in the previous picture we have seen the sympathetic trunk, how these sympathetic trunks are formed. And can anyone tell me how these sympathetic trunks are formed and what it is actually?
Sir, sympathetic trunks are actually a cluster of cellular bodies outside the central nervous system. এই জন্য এদেরকে গ্যাংলিয়ন বলা হয়, এবং গ্যাংলিয়নিক ট্রাঙ্কগুলো স্যার স্পাইনাল নার্ভের সাথে কানেক্টেড থাকে এই প্রি গ্যাংলিয়নিক ফাইবার আর পোস্ট গ্যাংলিয়নিক ফাইবার দিয়ে।
দুইটার কথা, একটা হচ্ছে sympathetic trunk, একটা হচ্ছে sympathetic ganglion. These are two terms, sympathetic trunk and sympathetic ganglion. These are not synonymous everywhere. Okay, because there are sympathetic ganglion. There are
মিলে কি সিম্প্যাথিক চেইন করে?
হ্যাঁ,
সিম্প্যাথিক অনেকগুলো সিম্প্যাথেটিক ট্রাঙ্ক মিলে কি সিম্প্যাথেটিক চেইন হয়?
sympathetic trunk মিলে sympathetic chain. তোমরা খুব কাছাকাছি, you are very close to the answer but not in the right exact.
সিম্প্যাথেটিক চেইনের মধ্যে কিছু নোডিউল থাকে, আবার কিছু প্লেন পার্ট থাকে। ওই নোডিউল গুলো হচ্ছে গ্যাংলিয়ন, আর মাঝে যেই কানেক্টিং পার্ট ওইটা মেবি ট্রাঙ্ক।
আচ্ছা, তাহলে বলো, what is ganglion, what is nucleus?
Sir, ganglion is whenever a cluster of nervous cellular bodies are outside the central nervous system. আর স্যার যদি সেটা সেন্ট্রাল নার্ভাস সিস্টেম বা সেরিব্রাল কর্টেক্স এগুলোর ভিতরে থাকে তখন সেগুলোকে নিউক্লিয়াস বলা হয়।
Very good. এটা ঠিক বলেছো। The collection of cell bodies of the neurons within the central nervous, এটা লিখে নাও সবাই, এগুলো কিন্তু খুব মানে একদম বেসিক কথাবার্তা। The collection of cell bodies of the neurons within the central nervous system are called nuclei, but nucleus in singular number. And the collection of cell bodies of the neurons outside the central nervous system is called ganglion. Same thing, but these two terms are not exchangeable. because it means gives many information, right? In previously you'll come to know that basal ganglia. In previous days, it was called basal ganglia, part of the gray matter within the brain. But now it is called specifically basal nuclei because this is collection of cell bodies within the central nervous system. And you know the central nervous system is formed by brain and spinal cord. Though this is not related to head and neck, let us match these informations. So you have rightly said this collection of cell bodies within the central nervous, outside the central nervous system is called ganglion. And now I tell you this is the sympathetic trunk. So how can you match these two information? This is sympathetic ganglion, no doubt, and this is sympathetic trunk. So how it is formed? Can you guess from this picture? This right half shows the somatic nervous system and this left half shows the autonomic nervous system, particularly the sympathetic one. Okay, I'm coming to the point. You see, there's a little relation with these two are present on both the sides. It's not that I'm not going to think that you are that naive to think that the somatic nervous system is always on the right side of our body and autonomic nervous system is always on the left side of our body. Right? You have the ability to understand that both the systems are present. Somatic and autonomic nervous systems are present on both the sides. But just for the simplification, they have drawn it on the right side, the somatic nervous system, and on the left side, the autonomic. But actually, in our body, both the systems are present in both the sides. Right? So let us start with this somatic one. The skin from the sensation comes through. The sensation comes through this is the ventral ramus and this is the dorsal ramus. Right? Okay, fine. This is the dorsal ramus, this is the ventral ramus. Just they are showing the ventral rami, arrangement of the fibers in the ventral. Same thing happens here through the dorsal rami, same arrangement. They could also show it on this side, these two, blue and black one could have been there also. But just for simplification, they are showing it in the ventral ramus. So the sensation is coming from the skin. There are receptors. It is taking the sensation through either the ventral or dorsal rami. Then it is passing to the trunk of the spinal nerve. Then it is reaching the ganglion, dorsal root ganglion, where actually the cell body of this neuron is located. And from this cell body up to this is called the peripheral process of this neuron. And from here up to the spinal cord, this is called the central process of the neuron. So information can be passing from the skin. Say, for example, you have got a pinprick here on the skin. This information will go through these neurons peripheral process and it may enter to the spinal, that is the cell body of the neuron, or it may bypass it and reach the posterior horn of the spinal cord. This is the posterior horn of the spinal cord and this is the anterior horn of the spinal cord. And you know, these are the gray ramus, that is the collection of cell bodies of the neurons. And these are the white matter, and this is the gray matter of the spinal cord, and this is the white matter of the spinal cord. And the gray matter is formed by a collection of the cell bodies of the neurons. So this is ending up here. Next, another neuron starts and it may go upwards, or it may make a reflex and stimulate the anterior horn cells, where from the axon goes through the anterior root of the spinal nerve, then trunk of the spinal nerve, then either the ventral ramus or dorsal ramus directly to the muscle. This is called the efferent neuron. This is the afferent neuron, this is the efferent neuron, right? And this is the connector neuron. This is a reflex, or it could have gone straight away to the thalamus, then to the sensory cortex. This is the somatic nervous system, but autonomic nervous system is not that easy. Similar arrangement is there that from a viscous, a stimulation will generate an impulse that will pass through the sympathetic chain or ganglion. What it is, I'm going to tell you a bit later. Then it passes through what is called white ramus. That I'll also be telling you later. Then it passes through the ventral ramus or dorsal ramus, whatever. Then it goes to the posterior root of the spinal nerve, where again the cell body is located, and its central process again enters. But instead of the posterior horn, there is yet another horn that is called lateral horn. There it actually ends. It ended at the posterior horn and it has ended at the lateral horn, where from this cell body is located in the lateral horn. Instead of the anterior horn, this cell body is located in the lateral horn, for where from the preganglionic connector, sympathetic connector neuron has started its journey, and it is taking the help of the somatic nerves anterior root. This is not the autonomic nerves, doesn't have their own nerves. They actually vine on the spinal nerve, somatic nerves. So spinal nerve is a somatic nerve where actually these autonomic fibers are taking the help of this root, anterior root, and they are passing to these ganglion. The ganglions are located just immediately medial to the spinal nerve roots, the rami. Actually, so this is the trunk and these are the ventral ramus, dorsal ramus. This is the location are there, and they may end up here, and the final third order neuron, that is the post ganglionic neuron, that may pass from here and go back to the either to the dorsal ramus or to the ventral ramus, and that actually reaches its target. What are the targets of these fiber?
The viscera.
Viscera. If we tell it in more details, three things are the targets of the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system, and that means autonomic nervous system: skeletal, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or gland. This black one will never go to the skeletal muscle. As the somatic one, it has reached the skeletal muscle. But this black one, though the color is same, the color combination is the color coding is same. I always prefer that this should have been color in different colors, because of that these are the same. No, these are not the same sensory fiber. This is coming from the skin, it is coming from the viscera. This is going to the skeletal muscle. This is not going, never ever going to the skeletal muscle. It is going either to the smooth muscle, or to the cardiac muscle, or to the glands. Right. So these are the target of these autonomic efferent fibers. And so many efferent fiber has got only one target organ, that is the skeletal muscle. Please be careful. Sometimes the drawings are very much helpful. Sometimes they are misleading. This blue one is not the same. I tell you, repeat it again. Because sometimes, most of the times, this is a very famous picture from the snails, but I don't understand why they have given the same color for two things which are not actually the same. Maybe they want to match this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, this one, but that is oversimplification. Because there's every chance that you will consider that the supplying, that is the somatic, sensory, and autonomic sensory fibers are the same. It gives the idea. Actually, this is never ever the same. Right. So what I want to tell you now, that whatever you know, I understand these blue and these blue are not the same. This red is not the same. Black is not the same. Now we can understand. Now let us go to the next point. What is
স্যার তাহলে আমাদের যে সোমাটিক সাপ্লাই ওটার মধ্যে কি অটোনমিক সাপ্লাইতে ইন্টারনিউরন থাকবে না?
অটোনমিক সাপ্লাইতে ইন্টারনিউরন কানেক্টর নিউরনের কথা বলছো?
জি স্যার।
কানেক্টর নিউরন বলতে আমরা বলি প্রিগ্যাংলিয়নিক নিউরন এন্ড পোস্টগ্যাংলিয়নিক নিউরন।
তাহলে স্যার রিফ্লেক্স কিভাবে হবে ডিসকাস করতে? connecting usually the reflexes pass করে স্যার reflex arc create করতে করে
very good question. এখন আমি যদি এগুলো বলি তাহলে রিফ্লেক্সের কথা যখন এসেছে let me show one thing. Just এখন তুমি বুঝবে না এগুলো আমরা সব পড়াবো হচ্ছে কে প্রশ্নটা করেছে আচ্ছা very good question. তোমরা বাকিটা কি বুঝতে পারছো ওয়ার্কিং ফর আগে বলো সবাই বলো তোমরা কি জানতে চাচ্ছো সেটা তোমরা বুঝতে পেরেছো রিফ্লেক্স জানতে চাচ্ছো রিফ্লেক্স ভিজুয়াল রিফ্লেক্স আচ্ছা আগে বলো হোয়াট ইজ রিফ্লেক্স কেউ বলো তাহলে বলতে পারো হোয়াট ইজ রিফ্লেক্স ভালো লাগলো প্রশ্নটা শুনে কিন্তু অন্যরা শেয়ার করছো কিনা জয়েন করছো কিনা রেজওয়ান 77 রোল কত রেজওয়ান করে আছে তাহলে করে আছে যেখানে ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম রেজওয়ান বলো তো হোয়াট ইজ রিফ্লেক্স
স্যার রিফ্লেক্সটা মূলত হচ্ছে স্যার আমার এফারেন্ট নাম মানে এফারেন্ট থেকে আসবে এবং দেন সেটা স্পাইনাল কর্ড লেভেলেই আমার একটা মানে এফারেন্ট আসার পর এফারেন্ট আমি আরেকটা সিগন্যাল পাস করবে জাস্ট স্পাইনাল কর্ড লেভেলে যে কর্ড সেন্ট্রাল কর্টেক্স থেকে যাবে না
ভেরি গুড ভালোই বলেছো কিন্তু এটাকে আমরা ডেফিনিশন হিসেবে বলবো যে এনি
involuntary reaction due to any stimulus
right involuntary response due to any stimulus is called reflex এক কথায় আমরা বললে involuntary response to any stimulus is called reflex এটা দেখো চোখে আলো পড়লে আমরা চোখটা বন্ধ করে ফেলি we just close our eyes when heavy light falls on our eyes or whenever we hear a loud sound we turn off our head and close our eyes and cover our eyes and ears, right? So these are called reflexes. Even simply, when we get a tinkle, we just move our hands. They don't have to wait for the central nervous system. I mean the central cortex to act to engage to have to actually do this work, right? So these are called reflexes. Involuntary response to any stimulus. But as Talha has mentioned, there are some visceral reflexes as well. There are some visceral reflexes. These examples that I have given you are all the somatic reflexes. That's the when you take off your hand, withdraw your hand. When you just go to a fire and you take off your hand. These are all the somatic reflexes. But you must remember that there are some visceral reflexes as well. And let me show you one thing here. He has asked for these. See, the sensory receptor doors, the sensory pathways, these are the somatic reflexes. And somatic reflexes always occur in the central nervous system, as you have mentioned. Raj has mentioned that, like this one. In this previous picture, you have seen these are the somatic reflexes. Right. Haven't you seen that? This is the somatic reflex. What one? Which one? This one. This one is an example of somatic reflex. That means the sensation has come down, and instead of going upwards, I have told you, instead of going upwards, it has joined the anterior neuron, and it has gone to the anterior horn and stimulated, and that has caused a contraction. That is different. This is an example of the somatic reflex. But autonomic reflexes can occur, it has to occur within the central nervous system. The somatic reflexes has to occur within the central nervous system. But in case of visceral autonomic reflexes or visceral reflexes, it can occur in the central nervous system, in the peripheral nervous system as well. There are some long reflexes, there are short reflexes. You can see the short reflexes are occurring in the peripheral nervous system in case of visceral reflexes. And long reflexes are occurring in the central nervous system. But in case of the somatic reflexes, all the somatic reflexes are occurring within the central nervous system. So I'm just from this picture, I'm telling you that we'll be discussing these things in detail when we study the next part, the central nervous system and eyeball. But just for your understanding that there are two kinds of reflexes. All the visceral reflexes doesn't need to go to the central nervous system. They even can happen within the peripheral nervous system. So I'm not going to that. Where I want to stress on that is this: how this incident and change is formed. See, these lateral horn. I told you this is the lateral horn on the thoracic and lumbar region. For synthetic, thoracolumbar outflows. So as cervical sympathetic system is called thoracolumbar outflow. That means the outflow is from thoracic 1 to lumbar 2 level. Lumbar 2. And parasympathetic system is called craniosacral outflow. Right. Parasympathetic system is called craniosacral outflow. Why is it called craniosacral outflow? Because some of the parasympathetic supply comes through the subcranial 3, 7, 9, 9, 10 of our lower oculomotor, facial, musculoskeletal vagus. And also there is some lateral horns in the sacral 2, 3, 4 region. Right. I can show you to you in very easy manner. This is what I want to tell you. You see, this is the outflow of the sympathetic system from thoracic 1 to lumbar 2. And there are lateral horns from where the sympathetic outflow occurs. But in case of parasympathetic, you can see this is coming from 3, 7, 9, 10 cranial nerves, and also from sacral 2, 3, 4. Right. These are class আছে তো তুমি ইশারা করে পরে ফলো করো হ্যাঁ ক্লাস আছে okay. So you can see this is the craniosacral outflow. Why is it craniosacral? Because outflow is coming from the cranial region through cranial 3rd, 7, 9, and 10, and also from sacral 2, 3, 4 segments. These 3 segments are similar that they also have a lateral horn. They also have a lateral horn. They also have these lateral horn. So if you see that this lateral horn is not present in all the segments of the spinal cord. These are present only from T1 to L2 and also in sacral 2, 3, 4. But the difference is that these T1 to L2 carry the fibers for sympathetic outflow, and sacral 2, 3, 4, though this is also lateral horn, but they carry the fibers for the cell bodies for the parasympathetic outflow, right? So now these sympathetic chains are never ever related to parasympathetic system. The sympathetic chains or tracts are related only to the sympathetic nervous system, right? Now I'm coming to that point. How it is formed? You see, these lateral horn starting from here. The cell body is located in the lateral horn. The axon is coming out, and it is taking the help of the anterior root of the spinal nerve. Because these two are the anterior roots, same anterior roots, and through it is passing to the trunk. Then it is passing to the ventral ramus, and through this white ramus communicant, this is this term, white ramus communicant, it goes into a ganglion that is located close to the ventral ramus, and this is called the ganglion. Why it is called ganglion? Because there is a collection of cell bodies of the neurons outside the central nervous system. This is called sympathetic ganglion. And similar sympathetic ganglion is present on above and below, and there is connection between these ganglions through some fibers. So these ganglions and their connecting fibers all together form the sympathetic trunk. Now you can understand what is sympathetic ganglion and what is sympathetic trunk. Is it clear? I'm coming to the next point. what happens to the what is the fate of these fibers. Which is more else is not understanding it properly. So what is sympathetic ganglion? Sympathetic ganglion is here that these fiber has entered through the white hair muscle communicant, and what are the fates that are not maintained? This is the ganglion, and there are other ganglions on the group of series of ganglions, and they are joined to each other by some ascending or descending fibers. So these ascending and descending fibers and the ganglion together forms the sympathetic trunk, and they are present on both the sides, not only on the left side, but it is also present here on the right side. Understand? The repair of chains. হ্যাঁ বলো টাইম শেষ
না স্যার টাইম আছে স্যার
তাহলে কি বলতে চাচ্ছিলাম বলো আমরা যদি ছবি দেখি বলো বলো কি বলতে চাও দেখো white lemmus communicant is this one through which the fibers are entering, and the gray lemmus communicant is this one. এটা হচ্ছে gray lemmus communicant. এটা দিয়ে post ganglionic fiberটা বের হয়ে যাচ্ছে. It is the post ganglionic fiber is coming out from this ganglion. Why it is white? Because it is still myelinated. This is myelinated fiber. That's why it is white. And when there is a synapse and the postganglionic fiber starts, it is not myelinated. That's why it is gray. And that's why it is called gray lemmus communicant. এইটুকু বুঝেছো? এইটা আমাদের বোঝাটাই দরকার। এরপর বাকিটুকু আমরা বুঝবো হচ্ছে গিয়ে যখন আমরা অটোনমিক সেন্ট্রাল নার্ভাস সিস্টেম করব। But you must understand what is sympathetic trunk, what is sympathetic chain. আরেকটা ছবি রাখি তাহলে আরেকটু ক্লিয়ার হবে, ওইটুকু আমি আজকে বলবো। নেক্সট দিন আমরা আসলে আরো ডিটেইলসে বলবো। এই দেখো ওই ছবিটাকেই আমরা ডিটেইলসে দেখাচ্ছি। এই দেখো craniosacral outflow, and this is thoracolumbar outflow. For the red one is the sympathetic and blue one is for the parasympathetic. The cranial and sacral outflow and the thoracolumbar. What happens? This is the spinal cord, and this is the sympathetic chain. Sympathetic chain, and you see there are the number of sympathetic chains are number equal to the sympathetic spinal cord segments. You know, there are 7 segments of the spinal cord in the 7 cervical vertebrae. There are 12 segments of the spinal cord within the 12 thoracic vertebrae. There are 5 lumbar segments of the spinal cord within the 5 lumbar vertebrae. But the number similar, so that means the number of the segments of the spinal cord are equal to the number of the spinal cord vertebrae number. But the sympathetic ganglion are not equal. You see, for 7 cervical vertebrae, there are only 3 sympathetic chains, cervical chains, for the superior, middle, and inferior. But for 12 thoracic vertebrae, there are 12 sympathetic ganglion on each side of the spinal cord. It is 1 to 12. Then number 1 and 2, number 3, 4, 5, all have got their own ganglions on the sympathetic chain. What happens? They are actually joined by some ascending or some descending fibers that I have shown you. And these altogether forms the sympathetic trunk and chain. If you have any question about this. We have a lot more things to tell about. These are called paravertebral or lateral. These are called prevertebral. And this is the terminal. I'm not going to tell it now, because these we discussed in the central nervous system part. But you must know these at least. What is sympathetic trunk and what is sympathetic chain and what is sympathetic ganglia? And there are other types of sympathetic ganglia. This is not the only example of sympathetic ganglia. You can see there are 3 types of sympathetic ganglia. Out of this, only one is the sympathetic trunk. These are called lateral. You must understand these are called lateral. But other than that, this is collateral. And this one is the terminal sympathetic ganglia. So sympathetic ganglia is not only one and not only of one type. Rather, it has got three types. So far we have discussed about only one type of sympathetic ganglia, that is the paravertebral or lateral. Para means on each side. Around. Paravertebral ganglia. And these paravertebral ganglia are actually not, as the name implies, paravertebral ganglia means there are multiple ganglions. Ganglion is a singular member. This one is a ganglion, this one is a ganglion, this one is a ganglion, this one is a ganglion. And all these ganglions are joined with each other through some, as I have told you, this ascending and descending fibers. And altogether makes the sympathetic trunk, right? Is it clear now? So let us see it here. This is the sympathetic trunk on the right side. This is the sympathetic trunk on the left side. And these are the paravertebral ganglia. And these are the prevertebral ganglia. And this one is the terminal ganglia. Is it now from this picture? This is taken from Moore's anatomy. We always see this one. That's why we are confused. ছবিটা দেখো, এই ছবিটা দেখো, এই ছবিটা ম্যাচ this one with this. These two are the sympathetic trunk chain. This is the sympathetic chain, and it's going downwards. And this one is the left one. And these are the prevertebral ganglion. That is the second category. This prevertebral category. This is the paravertebral category, sympathetic trunk. And how they are formed? তো একজন বলতে পারবে এখন? যেটা আমরা এই ছবিটা থেকে দেখো না, কেউ বলতে পারবে? অঙ্কন, দীপ্ত, তাজ দেখতে পাচ্ছি তাদেরকে আমি। কেউ একজন বলতে পারবে কি বুঝলে? সামারি করো দেখি। হ্যালো, হ্যালো, কেউ আছো? হ্যাঁ, বলো তুমি কি বুঝলে? কে বলছো? তাজ। হ্যাঁ, what did you understand? কি বুঝতে পেরেছো এখান থেকে?
গ্যাংলিয়ন তিন ধরনের আছে, একটা হচ্ছে প্যারাভার্টিব্রাল, আর একটা প্রিভার্টিব্রাল, আর একটা হচ্ছে টার্মিনাল গ্যাংলিয়ন।
হ্যাঁ, ওখানে আমরা আলোচনা করবো না, প্রিভার্টিব্রাল এন্ড টার্মিনাল নিয়ে আমরা এখন শুধু প্যারাভার্টিব্রাল যেটা সেটা নিয়ে কথা বলি। প্যারাভার্টিব্রাল এটাকে আমরা বলি সিম্পাথেটিক ট্রাঙ্ক। এটা কিভাবে তৈরি হয় বলো? বুঝতে অসুবিধা হচ্ছে? কে বলতে পারবে? আল্লাহ কোথায় গেল?
जी sir.
তুমি বলতে পারবে?
The trunks are basically the efferent fibers. Efferent fibers are connected হচ্ছে এখানে, এবং গ্যাংলিয়া গুলোর ভিতরে স্যার সেলুলার ক্লাস্টারস আছে, সেখানে হচ্ছে এফেক্টর অর্গানের মানে পাস এফেক্টর অর্গানে সাপ্লাই দেওয়ার জন্য সেখান থেকে স্যার এফারেন্ট নিউরনস গুলো বের হচ্ছে, and both upward direction and downward direction sir. এবং এইভাবে প্রত্যেকটা ভার্টিব্রাল লেভেল এক একটা করে সিম্প্যাথেটিক গ্যাংলিয়নস আছে, এবং গ্যাংলিয়ন গুলো কানেক্টেড করে স্যার মানে আপওয়ার্ড এন্ড ডাউনওয়ার্ড ফাইবারস দিয়ে কানেক্টেড থাকে স্যার। এটা দিয়ে হোল একটা পুরো চেইন ফর্ম হয়, যেটাকে আমরা সিম্প্যাথেটিক চেইন বলি।
এটা ঠিক বলেছো, কিন্তু দুইটা জিনিস একটু বলতে হবে। প্রিগ্যাংলিয়নিক শব্দটা দিয়ে বলতে হবে। ঠিক বলেছো, প্রিগ্যাংলিয়নিক ফাইবারটা এন্টার করবে, there are 4 fates। আমরা অনেকগুলো ফেট আছে এটার। Simplest fate হচ্ছে it will end up in the same ganglion and where from the postganglionic fiber will start, and it will pass through the ramus communicant to reach the spinal nerve again, and it will be distributed. It was the simplest fate. but it may be that it will not terminate here, or it will go upwards, or it will go downwards. Instead of terminating here in this sympathetic chain ganglion, it may go upwards or downwards, or ascend or descend. Okay, so by this actually these ascending or descending fibers, they are joined to form the chain or trunk. Right? Clear হচ্ছে বা সবাই clear হচ্ছে? These are not individual ganglions, because some fibers terminate here and they reach the corresponding spinal nerve through the ramus communicant, the postganglionic fibers. But some fibers, as you can see, they have not terminated. They have gone upwards or downwards, and they are making communication with the ganglion above or down below to make it a chain, a continuous structure, right? But these are two fates I have told you. There are two more fates that I'm not going to tell you now, because you can see one fiber has come out without even synapsing upwards or downwards or in the same ganglion. It has come out and has terminated elsewhere. So these are the other fates that I'll be telling you in the if I get the chance in the CNS and IVO card. But now for your understanding, just I have told you this, how the sympathetic trunk and chains are formed. But so many detailed things you must know when you will come to the next card. But for the time being, you just get the idea. এখন বুঝতে পেরেছো কিনা জিনিসটা? এই ascending fibers and descending fibers of the ganglion actually communicate with above or below ganglions to form a complete sympathetic trunk or chain on each side. But some of the fibers, the preganglionic fiber neurons, because this is the ganglion, so preganglion, this red one, can terminate here and give rise to the postganglion neurons. And some of the fibers can go upwards or downwards to communicate with the ganglion above or below, and thereby form the sympathetic trunk. Right? আপাতত এইটুকুই বুঝো। আরো অনেকগুলো ফেট আছে, দুইটা ফেট আছে, সেগুলো আমরা এখন ডিটেইলস করবো না।
তার মানে স্যার
কেন বলছি আমি আমার বলো
এই গ্যাংলিয়নিক ফাইবার যেগুলো ওগুলো ফেট
চারটা গ্যাংলিয়নিক ফাইবারের ফেট চারটা। তোমরা কি শুনতে চাও? তাহলে আমি একটু করে বলে দিই, তাহলে তোমাদের যেহেতু ইন্টারেস্ট আছে তাহলে আমি বলে দিই, যারা আবারও বলবো আমরা তখন না হয়। ঠিক আছে, ভেরি গুড। তাহলে দেখো, সিম্পাথেটিক ফাইবারের ফেট চারটা যে বললাম, একটা তো বললাম, এই দেখো সেম সেগমেন্টে এন্ড আপ হলো, এবং সেম সেগমেন্ট থেকে postganglionic dotted one as a postganglionic and the bold ones are the preganglionic. এই দেখো dotted ones postganglionic ফাইবারটা বের হয়ে আসলো সেম সেগমেন্ট থেকে। আরেকটা বললাম এই যে goes upwards or goes downwards, and this happens throughout, not only in the upper T1 and L2 only, everywhere. Say T5, some fibers, T5 এর অনেকগুলা সেল বডি আছে, some cell bodies will terminate here, some cell ganglions will terminate here and give rise to the postganglionic fibers from the same segment of the spinal ganglion, but some will go upwards and some will go downwards, and there is a continuation between all these segments. Right, like this one, they have shown it. This one they have shown it, but actually it is happening. It is 2 number fate. 3 number fate, instead of synapsing in these prevertebral ganglion or paravertebral ganglion, lateral ganglion, they go to the prevertebral ganglion straight away. দেখো এই T5 থেকে এই যে দেখাচ্ছে T6 থেকে এটা T5 T6, এটা সরাসরি এখানে কোনো এন্ড আপই করলো না, not in the same ganglion segment or sympathetic trunk, এটাকে এন্টার করেছে, বের হয়েছে as it is, বের হয়ে এসে এখানে সে টার্মিনেট করেছে, and the postganglionic fibers are coming out from these collateral ganglion. So this is another fate, third fate. একটা হলো segment synapse করে সেখান থেকে postganglionic, next fate is they don't end up in the same segment. Instead, they go upwards or downwards, and from there, within the paravertebral or sympathetic chain, they actually get their postganglionic fibers starting. But third thing is that they never ever end up here. Rather, they bypass this sympathetic chain and goes to the prevertebral ganglion. And these are celiac, supramesenteric, inframesenteric, starting in the abdomen. And the celiac ganglion, there they get their postganglionic fibers, axon, and this is the postganglionic fiber going to the viscus. This is the third fate. And the fourth fate is that, this is the fourth fate, and this is the terminal ganglion. You know, the medullary, adrenal medullary cell are called the modified sympathetic ganglion. You know it. Adrenal medullary cells are called the modified sympathetic ganglion. Why? Because they actually act as ganglion, sympathetic ganglion. So what happens? They have not synapse here in the sympathetic chain, in the same segment or in an upper or lower segment. Neither they have ended up or synapsed in the prevertebral ganglion. Instead, they have bypassed this as well and have directly reached the suprarenal gland adrenal medullary cells and stimulates them, and these cells actually acts as the postganglionic neurons. So this is the fourth fate. So the preganglionic fibers has got four fates, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. First fate, synapse in the same segment and postganglionic fibers come out. This is the first fate. Second fate, the synapse don't synapse in the same segment. Instead, they go upwards or they go downwards and synapse there, and from there actually the postganglionic fiber starts. This is the second stage, fate. Third fate, they go to they don't synapse in the same or upper or lower segments. Instead, they bypass the sympathetic chain and they go to the collateral ganglia, the celiac, supramesenteric, inframesenteric. There, they synapse with the postganglionic fibers, and these fibers reaches the viscus. So this is the third fate. And fourth fate is that they never end up here. They never, that is the lateral ganglia. They never end up in the collateral ganglia. They straightway go to the suprarenal gland and adrenal medullary cells. And these are called the terminal ganglion, and where they directly stimulate the adrenal medullary cells to release the epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is taken up by the blood and acts directly. So that is called the fourth fate of the ganglionic fibers of the sympathetic nervous system. Right? Is it clear now? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. এটা কিন্তু খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট একটা আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং। আমরা নেক্সট ক্লাসে বলবো একদম, আমি এটা কেন বলছি কারণ এটা আমরা অনেক আগে থেকেই বোঝা দরকার ছিল। এই জিনিসটা আমি কেন জানি না, আমাদের দেশে এই সিম্প্যাথেটিক প্যারাসিম্প্যাথেটিকের এই জিনিসটা একদম লাস্টে গিয়ে পড়ানো হয়, একদম লাস্ট সিএনএসএনআই বলে জন্য রেখে দেওয়া হয়, যার জন্য কিন্তু তোমরা এই যে এতদিন ধরে দেখো এই একটা কনসেপশন তোমাদের কিন্তু কখনোই বিল্ড আপ করেনি, অথচ এটা কিন্তু ফার্স্ট কার্ডেই হওয়া উচিত ছিল। থোরাক্সে, কারণ থোরাক্সে কি সিম্প্যাথেটিক সাপ্লাই নাই, এই যে থোরাক্সে হার্ট লাংসের সাপ্লাইটা কিভাবে আসলো তোমরা মুখস্থ করেছো, কিন্তু এটা মনে যে এটা কিভাবে আসলো অ্যাকচুয়ালি দেখো, থোরাক্সের সাপ্লাইটা কিন্তু ডিরেক্টলি যতটা না আসছে থোরাক্স থেকে অনেক বেশি আসছে হচ্ছে থেকে সার্ভাইকাল রিজিয়ন থেকে। খেয়াল করে ছবিটা দেখো, ছবিটা খেয়াল করো, কেন বলছি যে এগুলা তখনই ক্লিয়ার করা উচিত ছিল। T1, T2, T4, T আপ টু T4 থেকে কিছু আসছে, কিন্তু দেখা যাচ্ছে বেশি আসছে থেকে সার্ভাইকাল রিজিয়ন থেকে, কিন্তু কেমন করে আসলো এই প্রশ্নটা কিন্তু আমরা কখনোই বুঝি নাই আগে। এই ছবি থেকে তুমি বুঝতে পারছো T1টা চলে যাচ্ছে ইনফিরিয়র সার্ভাইকাল গ্যাংলিয়ন, মিডল সার্ভাইকাল গ্যাংলিয়ন, সুপিরিয়র সার্ভাইকাল গ্যাংলিয়ন, তার মধ্যে ইনফিরিয়র এবং মিডল থেকে মেইনলি থোরাক্সের হার্টের সাপ্লাই কিছুটা আসছে, সুপিরিয়র থেকেও চলে আসছে। দেখো চিন্তা করো, এই তুমি যদি একটু না বুঝতে যে preganglionic fiber goes upwards or goes downwards, তাহলে আমি যদি বলতাম থোরাক্সের সাপ্লাইটা আসে অ্যাকচুয়ালি সার্ভাইকাল রিজিয়ন থেকে, তুমি হা করে থাকতে, এটা কেমন কথা হলো? আর এটা না বুঝলে তুমি কেমন করে বুঝবা যে হার্টের পেইনটা কেন জতে আসে? Why is related to the jaw? Jaw is not supplied by the thoracic nerves. It is definitely supplied by the cervical supply. তাই না? এই jaw কেমন করে আসলো? এটা আমাদের তো বুঝতে হবে। এই যে জিনিসগুলো এগুলো বোঝার জন্যই কিন্তু আমাদের, আমি সবসময় প্রেফার করি ফার্স্ট ইয়ারে আসার পরই এই জিনিসগুলো বলতে, কিন্তু এগুলো আসলে বলার সুযোগ পাওয়া যায় না, কারণ কালার ওয়াইজ আগাতে আগাতে লাস্টে গিয়ে একদম যখন তোমরা সব বুকলেট পাঠিয়ে তারপরে এটা বলা হয়, তখন কিন্তু এইগুলা অনেক দেরি হয়ে গেছে। It's too late to understand. এই যে হার্টের তুমি এতদিন না বুঝে বুঝতে করেছো, আমরা বুঝতে পেরেছি, কিন্তু এটাতে দেখো এই ছবিটা একদম পরিষ্কার দেখিয়ে দিচ্ছে যে সার্ভাইকাল সাপ্লাইও কিন্তু আছে, মানে একচুয়ালি সার্ভাইকাল সাপ্লাই থোরাসিকই, কিন্তু এটা কিন্তু ডাইরেক্টলি থোরাসিক সেগমেন্ট থেকে আসছে না, ganglion থেকে আসছে, it is coming from the cervical ganglion, and I have told you there are 8 ganglions for 8 cervical nerves, 7 cervical segments. There are 7 cervical segments in the spinal cord and 8 cervical spinal nerves. But for these, only 3 cervical ganglions are there. Ganglia are there. এই জিনিসগুলো কিন্তু আমাদের ক্লিয়ার হতে হতে অনেক আগে, একদম ফার্স্ট কার্ডে থোরাক্সের শুরুতে এগুলো বলে দেওয়া উচিত ছিল আমাদের, কিন্তু আমরা ওই কার্ড বাই কার্ড আগাতে গিয়ে এগুলো আমরা বলতে পারি না, যার ফলে সারা জীবন আপ টু সিএনএস এন্ড আই বলতে আমাদের এই কনফিউশন গুলো রয়েই যায়। এটা আমার একটা দুঃখ। যাই হোক, আজকে একটুখানি বললাম, আরো অনেক কথা বলার আছে, আমরা বলবো এগুলো ইনশাআল্লাহ। আজকের জন্য ক্লাসটা শেষ করি।
জি স্যার।
বুঝতে পারছি আমি যেটা পয়েন্টটা বলতে চেয়েছি, কিভাবে সাপ্লাইটা পাচ্ছে, এই যে ফেটগুলো কি এগুলা 4টা ফেট, এগুলা আমরা আরো আলোচনা করবো এগুলো পরে। থ্যাংক ইউ, দেখা হবে ইনশাআল্লাহ।
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম স্যার।
Thank you for being. Assalamu alaikum.